Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we are bringing you our top 10 list of the best commanders from the Commander product for Dominaria United. This also includes the Legend Retold series. So basically any commander that isn't in the main set is fair play to put on this list. And this has been a tricky one to make. Let me tell you, there are so many good commanders in this set, it's really hard to narrow it down to 10. But we did our best, so without further ado, let's get going. And kicking things off at number 10, it's Bara Worm Speaker. Now this one is an interesting one because we haven't really had a mono green commander in this series yet, but this one is super cool. It's a lord for a tribal that we don't usually see. It's a lord for worms, and it doesn't just give them +1/+1, it gives them +2/+2 and trample. And then it has a very interesting ability because it lets us tap it to create a worm. But the thing is, the cost of this ability decreases based on the highest power amongst worms you control. So after the first time you do it, it's only costing you 2 mana to tap and to make a worm. This works really well with all sorts of things. You can get 6/6s really easily if you run something like Umbral Mantle, because you're going to have so much mana in green. You're going to be able to reuse the tap ability if you play Umbral Mantle. There's also other ways in green that you can untap this fairly easily, such as Seedborn Muse effects. But even if you don't get to untap it, it's still a 6/6 with trample every turn cycle. That is rather good. But of course, if you get to untap it, it goes even more nuts. And this just seems like a really fun and flavorful commander, and I am looking forward to build around this. Moving on to number 9, we have another monocolor commander. It is Zaryam Golden Wind. So it's a Griffin tribal commander, but it's a very interesting one because it kind of feeds off of itself. As soon as you deal damage to one opponent with it, it's going to make a 2/2 Griffin, and then that one is going to then presumably connect the next turn, and then it's going to double your Griffins basically every turn. So this is a really sweet one, and if you have any sort of token doubler, any sort of populate effect or anointed procession, this can get out of hand very quickly. Obviously coat of arms would also be amazing here because all your Griffins will just be massive, or even just something as simple as Cathar's Crusade can just help this deck really go over the top since they all have flying. This is just a really cool commander, and I'm sure that there's some Griffin fanboys out there that are really excited for this. Number 8, we have our first commander that is here just because of how unique and flavorful it is. It's Hubby Caleria. It is an archer commander. So the 3 commanders that we've seen so far have all been based around tribes, and this one is based around archers. It's going to give all your archers a Seedborn Muse effect. That is really strong, particularly since archers tend to have tap effects. And whenever these archers deal damage to a creature, be it combat damage or just tapping them to deal non-combat damage to a creature like a lot of archers can do, then you can pay 2 mana to draw a card. Any commander with the text draw a card in it is going to be quite decent. I did a quick search on Gather, and there's not that many good archers to be fair, so this is probably going to be more of a fun deck than a purely strong one, but still, it seems really fun to be fair, and I'd be quite excited to build around such an unusual tribe. At number 7, we have another Selesnya card. It is Torsten, founder of Bernalillo. Now this one is here purely on power level alone. I think this is one of the strongest commanders in the set, even though it costs 7 mana. Like, you just throw in a Karametra there, and you're just going to find all the lands in your deck. There's literally no problem casting this multiple times, and if you have any way to blink it or recur it, man, this gives you value. So you have to build your deck in a slightly restricted way so that almost all of it is lands and creatures if you want to get the full value, although drawing 5 cards is still fine. But if all of your deck is lands or creatures or close enough to it, then just, you're going to draw 7 cards when this comes into play. How are people going to keep up with that? Like, how is that possible? You have Restoration Angel, you have Teleportation Circle, you have Conjurer's Closet, though you should be careful about putting too many artifacts or enchantments because you don't want to water down the effect. But man, this just draws you so many cards. They just kind of went nuts on this commander in terms of what you're getting for 7 mana. I mean, you're paying 7 mana, but you're drawing like 5 to 7 cards, so I think you're probably okay with that. At number 6, we have Hazazon, Shaper of Sand, and this is a super flavorful one. It's going to make sand soldiers whenever a desert enters the battlefield under your control, and you can play those deserts from your graveyard. So if you get things that give you extra land drops, or things like Life from the Loam, or ways to just recycle your lands, then this is going to be really interesting. It also has Desert Walk, which shouldn't come up too often, but it might, who knows. So there's just many different things you can do with this. You can go for a token strategy, some kind of sacrifice strategy, something to do with getting your lands in or out from the graveyard. There's just a lot of different possibilities, and no matter how you build this, it just seems like it's going to be a really fun and very different commander, so I'm all for it. At number 5 we have Cadric Soul Kindler, and so far all of our commanders have been in Naya colors. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but this one is super unique. The legend rule doesn't apply to tokens you control, and whenever you get a non-token legendary permanent, you can pay 1 and then make a copy of it that lasts till end of turn. This works very well with all sorts of things, not just creatures. It can work with any sort of permanent. This could work well with planeswalkers, it can work with legendary lands, giving you a double usage out of them and effectively costing nothing if you copy a land. And there are just many ways you can abuse this effect and many fun things that you can do with this card. It's one of those Johnny cards that is just going to require some build around, but you know somebody's going to do something awesome with it and it's going to be fantastic. At number 4 we have a Yeshua Tanaka Armorer. This one seems to have slipped a little bit under the radar, but this is a really powerful Voltron commander. Expect to see a deck tech on her in this channel very soon. Now she is a Voltron commander that comes in with built-in unblockability with her second ability, since most opponents are going to have 3 artifacts. But that second ability can be very easy to abuse. You can actually give your opponents artifacts with stuff like Genesis Chamber and a few different ways. We could do it by giving them treasures, but giving them treasures is not ideal because then they can just sacrifice them to turn off your unblockability at instant speed, and we don't want that. And then the first ability is obviously also fantastic. Once you've put a bunch of equipment on her and made her power really high, then every time she attacks, you're going to be getting 1 or 2 things, and that can be really backbreaking for your opponent when you're cheating on that many cards and mana. So yeah, you want to build this in a very equipment heavy Voltron style, and once you do, it's probably going to pay off really well. Number 3 is Shannon, Sleeper's Scourge, and finally we have a black card on here. That was the last color that was missing, and it's a legendary tribal commander, but it is an incredibly strong one. So all of your legendary creatures are going to have menace. That's already pretty good. But then every time you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, you are just gonna draw a card straight up. You lose 1 life, sure, but you're drawing a card. So every single legend you're playing is replacing itself. How is that remotely balanced? How is anybody supposed to keep up with that again? When pretty much every card in your deck comes with draw a card tacked onto it, then you know that's pretty good. So this is here purely for power level reasons. I think this is going to be one of the strongest legendary matter commanders out there, and I'm really interested to see how this goes. At number 2 we have Torwauki the Younger, and this is a really spicy one. It has reach and lifelink, and then if another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1, so that's interesting as well. It's going to add 1 damage to all of your damaging effects that are combat based. And then when you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. So this can be built in multiple different ways, which is why it's so cool. Obviously it's going to give you a bunch of life, which is nice, and you could just build it around instant or sorceries, which is also quite good. You probably want to include a fair number of them in a deck. Although I think that going full Spell Slinger is probably not the best way to go with this, because in black and red, not exactly the best colors for that, to be honest. But then there's so many cards that just synergize with this. You could put in any sort of Mana Bobs effect or anything that's going to deal 1 damage to an opponent, because that is going to basically double it. Something I thought of as well would be Underworld Dreams. That's again going to double the damage because 1 just becomes 2 every time they draw a card. So that's another way you could go. You can do a quick search on Gatherer, and there's so many different ways you could build this. So many cool little interactions and ways to punish your opponent. It's not going to be a pleasant deck. People are probably going to gang up on you, but boy is it fun if you're a Johnny and like to find these kind of average cards that suddenly become super good in the right shell. And moving on to number 1, we have another super Johnny card, Verak Warped Sengir. This is a sweet one. It lets you basically double up on any effect that requires you to pay life. Now, one of the most straightforward interactions that I've seen people mention online is fetch lands, and that is true. Paying an extra 1 life with the fetch land is basically meaningless, but it's going to let you search up 2 lands and effectively ramp you. That is super strong. That being said, there's so many different ways, again, that you could build this. There's so many cool cards and interactions that you can find if you just do a quick search for paying life. I mean, the sky's the limit, really. You could build this in any way you see fit, and it's probably going to be super strong. There's probably infinite combos. You don't have to go there if you don't want to. Just something as simple as Greed, for example, is going to let you save 1 mana every time you do it, effectively doubling the amount of cards you can draw. This can be absolutely backbreaking in the right life manipulation deck, and I can't wait to see what kinds of stuff people come up with to exploit this ability to its fullest potential. Alright, that has been our top 10 commanders from the Commander products and ancillary products of Dominaria United. Let me know in the comments below if you think that I left some out or they're in the wrong order. I read all the comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel because we're growing right now. And until next time, take care.